Welcome to another episode of the Reboot Chronicles, a no-holds-barred forum with global leaders, authors, entrepreneurs, and CEOs about how organizations stay focused on growth and innovation in unprecedented times. I'm your host, Dean Tobias, coming to you live from Revive's North American headquarters in Chicago, and we would like to thank you for joining us from around the globe today. I'd like to welcome Kelly Kovack to the Reboot Chronicles, a beauty industry veteran. Kelly is a writer, speaker, podcaster, and CEO of BeautyMatter, a trusted industry resource for insiders who demand the most current beauty intelligence and insights, as well as helping leaders sort out this converging markets that we often talk about of health, beauty, and wellness. Kelly, it's good to see you.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Dean.
Yeah, I haven't seen you since your last conference I spoke at. We don't usually timestamp these programs because they're kind of timeless, but, we're taping here today on Women's Day. I'm not sure why it's a day or should be a week or a month or longer, it seems
It
like,
should be
but
every
it
day.
should be every day. Exactly. So I really just thought we'd start with that. I don't mean to put you on the spot, but what does it mean to you? And then as we talk about topics here today, what does it mean to the entrepreneurs and female entrepreneurs around the world?
Well, I kind of, I'm a little conflicted about it, to be quite honest with you, because I feel like there shouldn't be one day to just honor women and their achievements, sort of in the workplace.
Yep.
I'm hoping in the future it's not necessary, and we reach some sort of parity where we're not using descriptors like female founder. We're just founders.
Yes.
But that being said, we're a long ways away from that being the case. So I think anytime there's an opportunity to highlight women in leadership roles, it's really important. It's important for younger generations to have role models. I think it's also the opportunity for other women to call out their peers doing great things. For that reason, I think it's something to be embraced. But yeah, personally, a little conflicted about the whole thing.
As they say on Shark Reason, for that reason, I'm out. Yeah, I totally feel it. You and I have talked about our incubator in Chicago, 1871. We'll get into that in a minute. But, we did start a femtech. I never liked that name either. Group a long time ago, and it actually did help. But that was years ago. And now you're right. It's like we have them for all different minorities, and that city is, I think, rocking on all cylinders, and maybe not so much around the globe. I'm an advisor of many companies like you, but one is called Kodo, which is a Web3 platform. We can talk about a little bit later and get your Web3
Mhm.
thoughts just for women around the world. And it's starting out more as a community, but eventually it'll lead to Web3 commerce. So I want to touch on that as well. So didn't mean to put you on the spot, but
That's
it's
okay.
still good to acknowledge it, I think. So let's shift to, your wheelhouse, health, beauty, and wellness, and maybe start out with a couple of hot topics. Personalization for the last 2 years has been very hot in terms of personalizing products themselves, custom formulas, et cetera. Without getting too geeky, we can touch on that, but it's
Yeah.
somewhat technical. We'll keep it up high level, hopefully at the consumer level, but also personalizing the shopping experience, the buying experience, the whatever experience, services as well. With AR and AI technologies like Revieve, and where I'm chairman, and how has that changed the skincare game, the beauty game? Let's just take it at retail for starters. There's the big box retail guys, CVS, Walgreens, Target, Amazon, Walmart, and then you've got the specialty ones, Sephora, Ulta Beauty, Sally. We could go on, but maybe talk about how it's impacting those two sectors, because it's for the last few years that you've been in the right category. It's been on fire in terms of growth.
Yeah, I think the beauty category has been on fire. I think, the
In a good
interesting
way,
thing that
right?
I think's yeah, in a very good way. Um, we're definitely not recession proof, but we usually outperform other categories. So, it's a good category to be in. But, I think what's happened in the past decade is investors from other categories have discovered beauty. And, they like the multiples, they like the exit, so it's become a really hot category to invest in. But to answer your question about personalization,
Yeah.
you know, listen, at the end of the day, it is, we're all humans. So who doesn't want something created for them when they want it that's just for them? I think it's kind of an innate human desire. I think the technology has just caught up with being able to deliver on that. So the beauty industry has tried to tackle customization for a long time. I mean, remember prescriptives? It was a hot brand, couldn't scale because the technology wasn't there.
Right.
And at retail, I think personalization has been happening for a long time, but it's been happening in the back end. So scraping data on consumer behavior, especially in e-com, to serve them up kind of what they're looking for in a predictive way. I think what we're seeing, especially post-pandemic, is the integration of technology at retail that's more consumer facing. And that goes beyond sort of gimmicks. So, very early on, retail tech was always led by personalization, but it was more entertainment. So you had magic mirrors and that kind of thing. I think now it's gotten incredibly powerful, where it helps connect online with offline. If you're in a branded space, you have one consumer profile. So I think we're sort of early on, but I think things like AI and AR are really sort of the fuel for scaling these technologies.
Yeah, we're seeing great results with Revive and how it's helping guys and women just
Yeah.
navigate the complexity of it. You can
Yeah.
scan your face and go from just from a guy's perspective. The producers are all laughing in the background here. Let's say 50 products at a Walgreens or CVS, take it down to like 5 that maybe I should look at, right? And just that alone is amazing. But you're right, it's just table stakes. It's like, how do you take that to the next level and make it a
Yeah.
and then what about like consumer engagement and stuff like ongoing? That's more one-time purchase stuff we just talked about.
Yeah, I think the trick to all of these technologies is, how a brand builds out their tech stack. So, do you approach technology from sort of solving a problem, or and you're looking at the technology as the solution, or are you looking at technology as a tool to kind of further a strategic initiative? In this case, sort of the consumer experience. So I think that the challenge is connecting all these different technologies to create a seamless experience for the consumer. And also I think creating a history, right? I think if you can start capturing personal data about a consumer, that can be a bit predictive. So everyone's skin goes through cycles. um you know Everyone's skin changes according to the climate if they're traveling. So if you can start connecting sort of these kind of lifestyle changes along with purchasing behavior, um, and then I think it becomes very powerful where you create these very detailed personal profiles.
Yeah, I see the retailers doing that a lot. The big brands are starting to, though it's a little different. They're not always
Yep.
touching a customer and touching meaning direct to consumer or something, or at least having some control over the channel. But
Yeah.
let's
I've also
yeah.
I've also seen retailers and brands, that sharing of consumer data has always been kind of a sticky
We
wicket,
call it a
right?
third
Because
rail.
who
In Chicago, it's the L track
well,
third rail. Don't touch it.
it is, I guess, the third rail. So, it's who owns that consumer. And I think people have finally wrapped their brain around the fact that no one owns the consumer.
Yep.
The consumer is going to shop where the consumer wants to go. And if you, as a brand or a retailer, provide them a great experience, then it's going to be you. But I have seen more sharing of information sort of on a consumer level, especially between big brands and big retailers. So the third reel maybe doesn't give you as big of a shock these days.
Yeah, I think we've gone from reluctant sharing to strategic sharing. We'll
Yeah.
put that in a consulting report. Let's pick on the big brands for a little bit. As you know, you and I have talked about how did the big brands perform in developing emerging growth products or new brands altogether. So let's just pick on clean and green, or actually, let's just stick with personalization. So the
Mhm.
chemistry side of it now, personalizing a specific product for your skin versus our producer's skin, right? It's like two different people, two different things. Yeah, we're both human. Great. We'll start with that. But um, I've just noticed that the big brands struggle with that at scale, whether it's clean or green or personalization. And you can look at the top 10, and most of that growth is probably coming through acquisition and stuff. So before we get to how startups do that well, which is the punchline here, why do you think they struggle with it so much? It's these are big boys here. They know how to run stuff. I mean, they know how to run a line, but it seems like, we're in the roaring 20s here. We should have that figured out, shouldn't we?
Yeah, I think it's not for lack of trying or the desire. So, I think with big brands, it's, if it doesn't work, the mistake is a big one. And I mean, Lauder was in personalization with prescriptives.
It's
So
definitely no
I
lack of
think it's
trying. That's true. And by the way,
not for
this crosses health and wellness categories too: vitamins,
yeah.
supplements, medicine, everything.
Yeah. So, what I think we're seeing is that we're seeing big brands leverage the know-how of more nimble startups, and very often it leads to an acquisition, and then you acquire the talent. L'Oreal did it with Modiface. There is, I think Cody just partnered with Nourished,
Yep.
which is a 3D
Right.
printing supplement. So I think we're starting to see it percolate a little bit.
Percolate's a good
I
word.
mean,
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, you could argue that L'Oreal, or not L'Oreal, that Estee Lauder is in the personalized fragrance business because Le Labo personalizes fragrance, but it's a sticker that has your name on it. It's not your fragrance. But
Yeah.
you know what? For some customers, that's enough. It makes
I
them
th-
feel
I
special,
think
right?
the
So
printing industry innovated that 20 years ago. So yeah,
yeah, but I think
doesn't
it
quite
all
count
not well, I think it counts to that consumer, right?
at the
So I think
presentation
it
level. Yes. Okay.
yeah.
Yeah.
So I think it depends on, not everything has to be customized.
Yeah.
Um but I do think that I think the big guys will get there. They're just going to be kind of slower
Right.
to making it happen, and it very likely might happen with an acquisition, but
Right.
they're definitely working on it.
So you and I advise a lot of startups and help them get through the trajectory phase. And as I look at companies, our incubator in Chicago, 1871, one of the largest in the world, and there's a few of us who are co-founders, and we we began to get so many health and wellness and medical startups in there that we started a separate one down the hall in the merchandise market that's called Matter. Each of those organizations, startups, have raised billions of dollars. So it's a hot place, hot commodity, and I just think we're in this remarkable renaissance period of entrepreneurial innovation regardless of economies going up and down in politics. We're in a remarkable phase that I don't think is going to end. I'm very bullish on it. So I so just maybe let's talk about that. Just there's so much. So I see entrepreneurs starting up companies in dozens of categories on a monthly basis, from distribution to nanotechnology, right? And the ones I see in health, beauty, and wellness are so passionate about the category, which is the first thing I look for in an entrepreneur. And I'm sure you see that as well. Do you think that's a good thing? Or, I mean, sometimes passion can get in the way of, hey, we need to run a business here and we need to get this to scale.
Yeah,
You probably
listen,
didn't anticipate that twist of the question.
no, no, it's a
Neither did
great
I.
question. It's a great question because passion only gets you so far.
Yeah.
But that being said, if you're not passionate about what you're building and you're only building it for an opportunity, like those brands that are built purely on an opportunity, that have their exit plan before they even have the first piece of product made, they very often feel incredibly soulless, and they don't have that that kind of unknown, you know it when you see it, that connection with consumers that's visceral.
Right.
I think that comes from passion. It's not to say that you can't incubate these brands. You certainly can. But I do think that there is no replicating the passion of a really smart founder and the creativity that goes along with that.
Right. Yeah. Whether it's personalized or clean or green or what else? What other trends are you seeing in the startup community?
Yeah, so when we were kind of in the throes of COVID and the economy, and sort of the geopolitical environment, I think there was kind of a necessary reset that needed to happen in the category, because in the past decade, the barrier to entry for launching a beauty brand, let's just say, has become so low. I mean, you can throw up a website, you can buy product in very small quantities, wrap a label on it, and you're in business. The difference is you're selling product, you're not building a brand.
Especially these
Um,
days with the co-packing things. Same thing with the
yes.
food industry, pretty active there too. It's like,
Yeah.
it's too easy.
S- So
The entrepreneurs would
what you've
just disagree with what we just said. It's not easy, but
well,
you know what I
I
mean.
mean,
The barriers to entry are
it
lower.
yeah, but that being said, I have been in the beauty industry 25 years. It's never been easier to build a brand. It's never been more expensive to scale a brand, nor has it ever been more competitive.
So when you look at that,
So,
retail, DTC, direct to consumer, e-com, what's an entrepreneur to do? Because it's I we have friends that get shelf space and we have friends that don't, right?
yeah. I think unfortunately, and it pains me to say this, but the days of self-funding a startup to scale, um, in the current environment, it's incredibly difficult,
Yep,
because the cost of doing business at Sephora, Ulta, Walmart, Target, you know, the cost of building businesses in those retailers are astronomical.
exactly.
Um,
Just
and
take one category, compliance, things like that that
yeah.
you never would worry about as a, entrepreneur.
Well, I would say, I would say everyone should worry about compliance, but you're right, a lot of people don't.
Oh, they have all kinds of
Um,
hurdles you have to jump over, long documents.
but very often I see people who are raising money and they've gotten into X retailer and they've raised a couple $1,000,000, and I'm like, okay, well that buys you inventory. What's your plan?
Right.
Like the marketing costs of competing in what has become an incredibly noisy environment. um, it's tough. So I although I remain optimistic because I see what J.C. Penney's is doing with 13 Loon, and
They're
they're
very,
moving.
very supportive retailer, by the way. We had their CEO on
Yep,
just recently. Yep,
and they are one of the only retailers that have some scale behind them,
yep,
where you can go in as an indie brand without venture backing, um, and actually build a business.
exactly.
Um, and I give J.C. Penney so much credit because it would have been very easy once Sephora exited to just kind of recreate the beauty floor, with the usual suspects, and instead they took it down to the bones and took some risks and actually built what customers want.
That was the
And I think it's really working.
best lesson ever. They actually learned a good
Yeah,
lesson from the,
yeah.
Sephora in and out thing, and
But super risky, and I give them credit for doing that. It
still in
seems
the
to be
middle of a
working.
turnaround. Let's not forget that. Okay, so the whole point of this was the rules are changing.
Yep.
Roaring 20s, what do you recommend entrepreneurs do now? They need to raise money, they need to build scale. Market facing, go to market stuff. Give them some tips.
Yeah, I think that I think I think being a founder over the past decade has been really glamorized.
Yeah,
And I think that with that sort of a glamorization of what being a founder is, I think now, when times get tough, that's when sort of the rubber hits the road. And being a founder is tough. It's lonely. So, for anyone that is contemplating starting a business now, or anytime, or even just starting, or even just making a decision to work at a startup, like, working in an entrepreneurial environment is not for everyone.
Exactly.
Um, and so really kind of understand what you're getting into. Very often on these kind of shows, or even in print media, you only hear the sexy side of running a business. You rarely hear the stories of, bankruptcies, or how brands fall apart. So really understand what you're getting yourself into. Um, Also, have a strategy if you're going to raise money. Be really careful, especially in the early stages of, who you're raising money from. Make sure it's a cultural fit, that there's alignment in your vision. I see a lot of founders, mm, they take money without realizing what they've signed up for. And
Especially, yeah,
also,
especially in a down
yeah,
economy. Sure.
Yep. And I also think that, you see these businesses scale very quickly. But it takes a long time to build a brand. So, have a long-term vision. Don't look for quick wins. There are no silver bullets. Just have a long-term strategy and build off wins. It's a tough time right now, but I think, anytime there's sort of a crisis, it creates a lot of opportunity. And I think we're starting to see brands emerge that are going to change how we contemplate what a brand is, what a product is, how we shop. So there's an incredible amount of innovation happening right now, and I think there's a lot of opportunity.
Yeah, absolutely. So we've talked about the big companies and the small companies, and I have this program called Dancing with Startups that gets them together. So do you see a lot of M&A coming up down the road with the top 10 buying up some, not just products,
Yeah,
services, extended areas like supplements. No one thought Cody would be getting into 3D printed vitamins. Yeah,
yeah.
what are your thoughts?
Um, it's been, we track M&A and kind of deal flow in the beauty
Of
and
course.
wellness
Yeah,
space. And so it's been a slow, like, 3 quarters. First quarter of this year,
it's all right.
really
Yeah.
slow. Um, we just had a webinar with someone in investment banking, and their thought was that we're going to start seeing deal flow pick up the back half of the year. Um,
Yeah,
the strategics
I'm
have
looking
done
out,
very
like,
well.
looking out over the next 3, 4 years. It's like I see that natural machine. I don't know. My opinion, answering my own question, is I see it being pretty robust, but just forget about valuations and all that stuff. It's more about,
Yep.
to me, it's just more about growth and innovation. And can the big brands get better at acquiring and actually leveraging and scaling? That doesn't always work either. You take a Unilever who's done a very good job of keeping certain brands independent, like Dermalogica and
Yep.
others. Brilliant. So something I teach at Kellogg, right? It's like you need to know whether you're going to really integrate something into the mothership or not. But yeah, my guess is from a deal flow perspective, you guys are going to be called on to look at some interesting ones. I hope, because
Yeah. I mean,
not every company needs to stay independent for that long. But oh yeah,
I
it's
I think I do think the strategics have gotten better. I think Estee Lauder, is now sort of
much better.
deploying a
Yep.
strategy of taking minority stakes. So there's sort of this period of getting to know a business, getting to know the leadership. Um, so yeah, I mean, I think, at the end of the day, though, not all of these integrations work, and I think the hard thing for a lot of owners, founders, to accept is, once they sell their business, there's the potential that it may no longer exist at some point.
Yeah, I was being polite, but yes, there's a lot of we call it the brain damage phase, but so is going public. So it,
Yep.
Yeah, you look at things like, Schmidt's Naturals and others, some make it in, some stay, some, morph
Yeah.
into other things. That's normal. That's absolutely normal. And the let's shift a little bit, if you don't mind, to technology. I did a metaverse talk at one of your conferences, part of my Web3 keynote, which is
Mhm.
a pretty blunt keynote. I started doing it a year ago, so it continues to evolve. But I've always been very frank about that what brands and retailers should not do, and forget about all the hype and the buzz and where people
Mhm.
really are and where they are not. Because I built one of the first 3D virtual worlds way back, and the usage is still about the same. So that's fine. Technology will evolve, but I thought rather than metaversey stuff, like to me, I'm kind of excited about Web3, not just because I'm advising some of them, but just the impact on future indie brands and women, for instance. Like we talked about, that whole
Mhm.
democratization of entrepreneurial commerce. Just take that, not so much the community part, but the actual commerce. And so the promise of Web3 that some don't want to see happen, like the oligopolies, is hey, rather than an 80-20 rev split, just to pick numbers, 20 going to the
Mhm.
entrepreneur, let's flip it and do 2080. So I'm actually
Yeah.
keeping some of my money. And most people talk about that from a personal point of view or a creator point of view. I'm talking about from a direct to consumer point of view. So,
Mhm.
yeah, what say you? What are your thoughts about that whole, not so much creator, we can get into that, but just the promise of Web3?
Listen, I mean, on a philosophical level, I love everything that Web3 stands for. And I also feel like that brands, regardless of where they are, kind of in the adoption of Web3, there are a lot of aspects of Web3 ownership, sort of involving community, that can be applied to any business. So, on one hand, I think Web3 is kind of a philosophy of doing business, as much as it is sort of the practical execution, from a technology standpoint. Um, so I'm excited for what that means. I've always been a big proponent of community, and I think Web3 is kind of community on steroids.
It usually starts with community, like Kodo in
Yeah.
India, UAE, and Singapore. It's only female led stuff, but it's all about community because they know Web3 is going to take a while with
Yeah.
tokenization and just e-commerce in general. But you're right, the power of the community is one thing, but also the power of customers buying to me is the real thing.
Well, that's what keeps everything going, right?
Yeah, and let's face it, the internet and the web is run by, it's an oligopoly now. I've been through 1, 2, and pushing
Yeah.
3, but very realistic about who wants it and who doesn't. Or do the Web 2 guys just want to run Web 3, and that 80-20
Well,
thing
that's I
isn't
mean,
going to happen.
the thing that is I think that's where I struggle a little bit.
Yeah.
So you see these founders who have made ungodly amounts of money,
Yes.
kind of taking advantage of us in Web 2. And now they want us to believe that they've found religion somehow and they're going to democratize what they, made their fortunes on. I find that a little bit hard. That's a hard pill to swallow.
Take that, Facebook. Hey, let's talk about creators and influencers. I know you've got a strong opinion about them.
I
Is this a
do.
bubble? I mean, is the gig up on a lot of these people?
Look, I don't think it's I don't
It
think
wasn't a leading question, by the way.
yeah, I don't think it's I think the industry of creators, there may be kind of a bubble happening, but the idea of creators, influencers, like, listen, word of mouth and using people of influence has always been around. I
centuries,
used it 25 years ago.
centuries, actually. Yeah,
Yeah.
way
So
back.
this is not it's not a new concept. Social media kind of made it bigger than it's ever been, and the ability to monetize it. And but I think that um now that it's first of all, I think creators should be compensated for the work they do.
Absolutely.
But I think it's also, we're seeing this first generation of creators. Being a creator is hard. Like, being on 24/7 is hard. So I think you're seeing maybe a bubble, but I think you're also seeing burnout. Like, is it really sustainable?
Yeah,
And if you've built this audience, like how can you evolve it into something else that doesn't require you being on social media 24/7?
exactly.
I think it's evolving more than it's a bubble per se.
Yeah. Yeah, good point. Probably the same thing with podcasts. It's been all the rage, and many will come and go because you're right. It is something that you're either committed to it or you're not. Whereas creators, there's a little bit of gosh, I won't even say 80-20 principle, probably like 1% and then the rest of them, right? Similar
Yeah.
types of models. But great insights, Kelly. We're going to have to leave it there, but it's really
Yeah.
nice to talk to someone who is so passionate about helping entrepreneurs grow, especially in the health, beauty, and wellness space, because
Yeah.
it's one that I do not see slowing down. So good choices there. Really
Yeah.
appreciate you being on. You've been
Thank you,
listening to
Dean.
Kelly Novak, who is the CEO of the Beauty Matter, and Kelly Kovack is coming to us from New York today. This is Dean Tobias with the Reboot Chronicles. I want to thank you for joining us, and we'll see you soon.